Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's planning meeting. We have two applications to consider on the agenda, along with a report on planning appeals. I am happy with this and intend to take the business in the order set out on the agenda. The first item is apologies for absence, which I think we have a full... everyone's here today, so we've got no
Chair.
apologies.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. The second item is declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests and/or other interests not already on their register of interests in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have any interest to declare?
None received, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. We'll move on to the next item, item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday the 20th of February. Are we happy that they are a correct record, and can we agree them by acclamation?
I'll move them, Chair.
And seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Thanks, colleagues. That takes us to the main business for the meeting, our two applications. Before we start, I would like the clerk to explain, for the benefit of members, speakers and those watching on YouTube, how we will deal with them.
Thank you, Chair. This is the procedure for considering the business this afternoon. The Chair will introduce the application, then ask the planning officers to deliver a brief presentation on the application to members, and to then highlight any representations that have been received. The late representations report has been published on the Council's website, and hard copies have been circulated to you. After this, the Chair will ask the speakers to address the meeting. There are 4 speakers today. They will be speaking on both applications. Speakers will each have 3 minutes to put forward their views. There will be a reminder given by the clerk when 30 seconds remain. At the end of the 3 minutes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask the speaker questions, if necessary, to clarify any points that they have made. After the speaker has addressed the committee and answered any questions, then they will be allowed to remain in the meeting, but they will not be allowed to participate further from this point. The Chair will open up the meeting for questions to officers, a debate by the committee, and a determination on the application by a vote. The votes will be taken using the voting facility on your microphones. Finally, members, this meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Council's website. Please note that others may choose to copy this recording. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Right, we'll move on to the first application, which, as I'm sure most members will be aware from the last meeting, was deferred, which is NED/23/00565/FL Wessington. In line with normal practices, I'm going to ask the planning officer to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. I will allow the officers to complete the presentation. Consequently, members, unless you have a point of order that you feel cannot wait, could you please reserve these or any other questions about the process until the end? So I'm now going to ask Stephen Wigglesworth to give you the presentation. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. We're just having a little issue running the presentation. Okay, yeah. it's working. So, yeah, this is proposed as a residential development for 9 dwellings at land opposite Wistaines Green, Matlock Road, Wessington. There have been some representations received after our committee report was published. The number of objections remains at 18. The matters they raise are either already dealt with in the report or dealt with in the published late representations report. One to note is the Highway Authority, Derbyshire County Council have provided written comments and maintain their previous comments as already reported in the committee report and accept the proposed footway. Officers also included an update to the list of plans being considered and those being conditioned. This is to aid clarity so that the full set of plans are updated to show the new footway. These have been received and the conditions are updated accordingly in the late representations report. There was also a minor correction report in that report to remove a superseded comment. The site is located at Wessington. It lies outside the settlement development limits and therefore is classed as being within the countryside in planning terms. The boundary of the settlement development limit is on the opposite side of Matlock Road and includes the recently constructed Wistaines Green development. The site is approximately 0.45 hectares in area and comprises part of a field which was formerly pasture land. Spring Gardens is a residential development to the southeast. There is an existing footway on Matlock Road on the same side of the road as the proposed development to the southeast, which the proposal will connect onto. The Proctors Motors and Storage 2000 site lies to the northwest. Adjoining the Proctors site is Cottage Farm, Matlock Road. Cottage Farm is identified as a non-designated heritage asset in the Wessington Neighbourhood Plan. There is a mature mixed hedgerow of native species to the field boundaries with occasional mature trees, which are mainly ash within the hedgerow. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust have identified these as wildlife corridors. The site shows some areas of low to medium risk of surface water flooding along the front of the site facing onto Matlock Road. This is opposite the Wistaines Green access and extends in both directions following the direction of the road, and that's been addressed by submission of a flood risk assessment. This shows some of the planning constraints, including the settlement development limits shown as red and outline, and the areas of surface water flooding are shown in blue. The surface water flooding has been dealt with by submission of a flood risk assessment. This is a location plan showing the site area edged in red, and this is the existing site plan showing the site area edged in red. Here we have the proposed site plan, which shows the layout of the 9 dwellings and location of the various house types. All the dwellings are 2-storey. Most of the dwellings have detached garages, which are set back from the frontage to the side or behind the dwellings. There are 2 dwellings with integral garages, plots 8 and 9. In general, the proposed development will appear much less car-dominated than the approved development. Points to note are that the development has been designed to be outward-looking to Matlock Road and for the dwellings to have interest in the way of openings, where these also front onto the access road. The dwellings have also been designed to maintain the quality of the architectural detailing of the front on the rear as well, so that they have as pleasant an appearance from the rear as they do from the front. For example, the openings still retain heads and sills, and there is interesting brick detailing. This is to enhance the appearance of the development to aid it appearing outward-looking from other vantage points. This is the landscaping plan. Points to note are that the existing hedgerows are retained, new hedgerow to the east and west perimeters of the site, 3 large trees, 16 smaller trees, and hedgerows forming boundaries within the site where it fronts onto the access road. This is the highways plan demonstrating the swept paths of vehicles and visibility displays. It's worth noting that the Highway Authority have not objected to the scheme subject to conditions, and a footpath has been proposed to link the site back into the existing footway on Matlock Road. There does remain concern in the representations we've received about highway safety. However, the Highways Authority have not objected to the scheme. This is the tree survey. It shows the 2 trees, T7 and T10, which will be retained on the site, and the extent of protective fencing required for those. These are the elevations. I'll just skip through these because you saw them yesterday, but they're there in case you need to refer to them. Then we move on to the visualisations. So this is a rendered view from Matlock Road. Again, this is another rendered view from Matlock Road looking down the access, the proposed access. And again, this is a rendered view looking across Matlock Road to the development. This section is provided to give an approximate comparison of heights on the proposed development to the existing development. It shows the Cresbrook 2 house type is approximately 632mm taller to ridge than the house opposite on Wistaines Green, and much of this difference could be attributed to the difference in levels between the two sites. This is looking northwest at Matlock Road with the site on the left. The access to Wistaines Green is on the right. Note the tree in the foreground will be lost due to its condition. The tree in the distance will be retained, and this image looks towards where the new access would be provided. This is the access that has been created. This is the access that's been created as part of the works undertaken to implement the extant permission. And this is the site. Just a few shots of the site just to get a feel for it and the adjoining development. It's worth noting that most of the trees shown here would be removed due to their condition. This is an example of some of the more historic brick building stock in Wessington, which is brick detailing at the eaves, and the proposed development has a modern take on this type of brick detailing. And this is the development opposite, it's Wistaines Green, just to get a feel for the character of that. This is a view of the site over Proctor's Motors access looking in a southeasterly direction. So the next slide is the extant permission. So this is the approved development, which is extant, proven by lawful development certificate, and could therefore already be developed to these plans at any time. This is important to see for comparison. The internal road of the approved development would appear car dominated. It suffers to the back end of the access road, where there is a sea of car parking and a lot of close bordered fencing backing onto the internal road of the approved scheme. Together, these elements would not make it as high quality an environment as the proposed scheme. These are some of the approved house types. They are the approved house types. Some are similar in form to the Grindleford Padley type, but some of them, some of the approved dwellings had the ridge running the short axis of the building and would have appeared to have a skinny fronts with out of proportion roofs, appearing skinny and top heavy. So leaving you there with a visual of the proposed development again. So the principle of the proposal is contrary to the development plan because it is located outside of the settlement development limits. This weighs against the scheme. However, the fact that an extant permission exists on the site for 8 dwellings is a weighty material consideration in favour of approving a development of this character, which in many ways is comparable with that of the approved previously. Officers also contend that the design and layout of the latest scheme is superior to that previously approved and will represent an upgrade on that already approved. This weighs in favour of the scheme. There are other factors to be taken into account, but mostly they are neutral in weight and merely address planning considerations such as surface water flooding, neighbouring amenity, heritage and highway safety. However, the ecological enhancements that can be achieved through the proposed scheme do add some further limited weight in favour of the proposal. Therefore, officers consider there are other material matters that in this case outweigh the importance to be attached to the development plan, and accordingly recommend that, subject to conditions, planning permission is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, colleagues, we have two speakers on the application. The first, which is Glenn Day, the applicant. He will have 3 minutes to get over his points and will be informed when he has 30 seconds to remain. You can ask him to clarify any matters that have been raised, but remember your questions should only relate to the points which have already been made. Right, so if you'd like to... Oh, it's already there.
Is that on? Yeah.
Right, you've got
Is that the
3
speaker
minutes.
on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you've got
Thank
3
you,
minutes
Mr.
when you're
Chair.
ready. Thanks.
I would like to start by thanking Mr. Wigglesworth for the effort and the hard work he's put into hopefully approving this scheme, or he has approved this scheme. We've worked very closely with him over the past 12 months, and it is 12 months next week from applying for this permission. The extant permission was there for 8, 4 3-bed and 4 4-bed. We're adding 1 4-bed. So we always saw this, rightly or wrongly, as being permission in a sense for one dwelling more than was already there, a 4-bed dwelling. I'd like to go through the points that were made at the last meeting about the new road position. That new road position has been approved by Highways, as we know. We would have preferred to use the original road because it exists. It's been stoned, the entrance has been made. It would have been a lot easier. But the site, Mr. Wigglesworth pointed this out, was dominated by the road, and the properties didn't really look onto the main road, and he wanted that. So the only way we could achieve that was to move the road. So that's what we've done. As I say, the Highways have approved it, and the police also approved it. A point was made last time about lack of power, drainage, utilities to the site. We've had no indication that this be the case. We're quite happy that we can get power there to service the 9 dwellings. We can get water there to service the 9 dwellings, and we can get sewage away from those 9 dwellings. The hedgerows, we appreciate we've got to put back the hedgerows that were taken out for the original entrance, and that we would have to make a new entrance, and we intend to put a management committee in place on that site when we sell the properties, and they are to be sold, not to be rented, because that was also made to me personally. Yes, we have a large rental portfolio, but these will be sold, these properties, not rented. We will put a management committee there, which will look at the hedgerows, and they will have
30 seconds remain.
a charge every year, and we will maintain the hedgerows. Definitely better than they are now. You've seen the new footpath that's on the plan, which gets us now onto the main road, which stops any problems with safety that was pointed out. And I think that's it. The rest has been covered by Mr. Wigglesworth. And again, I thank him for all his effort. And we've done a lot of the design work around his suggestions and the planner's suggestions.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Have members got any points that they would like to raise with Mr. Day on this? No questions? Nope. Thank you. You can... oh, he's gone. You take your seat. Right, the next speaker on this is Agent Ted Tuncliffe.
Is it on? No?
Yeah, so you've got three minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Just as architects, obviously, we're asked to improve the existing permission, which we could be started now, but we were asked to look at it and make it a more attractive scheme. And also we've worked with the planner, Stephen Wigglesworth, to improve the look of it and the arrangement of it. So just going over the negatives of, I think Stephen's gone through a lot of these before, but Stephen pointed out that there are quite wide gables and very narrow frontages, and they look like a slice of, like a slice of cake, really. They're not very attractive in terms of the frontage. And also the back gardens of the existing dwellings are actually facing the main road. So you're going to see people's outhouses and stuff like that, and stuff that people keep at the back of the houses onto the front of the plot. So what we tried to do is put the houses facing the road as the best elevations and frontage we could. Also, has been mentioned before, the car parking was very, very dominant on this scheme, and we've tried to hide it away in between dwellings and the back of dwellings to make it less dominant. So what we've done, we created a 3D model of it and tried to integrate the houses with the streetscape, looking at the hedgerows, looking at the walls, and trying to make it an overall composition to make it look attractive. So going through the positives of the scheme, so we obviously had to change the road. We worked very closely with the planning department to do that, and the parking's now in between the dwellings. The gables are much reduced in size, of between 7 and 7.5 metres, which is in keeping with the traditional gables you would have got 100 years ago. So we've also improved the aesthetics. We've got corbelled brick details at the eaves, half-round gutters, rise and fall gutters, all traditional detailing. The windows are set back. They've got quite deep reveals, so they're set back like they would have been years ago. So half a brick back from the main elevation, so it gives some depth to the elevation. They've got stone lintels and sills and some quite interesting brickwork details. And we've also mixed in some render and some brick together to give it some variation. So all the dwellings have integrated solar PV panels into the roof on the rear elevation.
30 seconds remain.
We've also, as previously mentioned, we've introduced quite a lot of biodiversity enhancement. So we've got 3 large replacement trees, 17 trees, 2 quite large hedgerows have been put back. We've got a hedgerow management plan, and we've got a series of bird and bat boxes and swift nesting boxes integrated within the scheme. And the last thing really is the surface runoff is much reduced, so that it reduces flooding.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for the speaker? No, if you'd like to take your seat again, Mr. Timothy, thanks. Colleagues, you will now have the opportunity to put questions to the officers about the application. As always, I would like to keep this part of the proceedings focused on getting clarity about any points you are not sure of. Once we have done this, we can then have a discussion about the application based on all that we have heard and read. Councillor Gare.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the footpath going into the village.
Could you use that rare
Does it give access right into the village? Because there seems to be some suggestions like,
Yeah, if you'd like to start again. Sorry.
sorry about that. Right, I think that's it. Yeah, I'm asking about the path, the new pathway. Does it take somebody all the way into the village, or do they have to cross that main road? I noticed that there's quite a few suggestions about needing to cross the road. Is that because it doesn't go all the way to the settlement?
It links onto a footpath that goes all the way into the settlement. There's no need to cross the road.
Thank you.
Councillor Liggett.
Yeah, I just wonder if you could explain what a lawful development certificate is, please.
Okay, a lawful development certificate is basically an application that's made to the council to prove something is lawful, and in this case the application was to prove that a lawful start had happened on the existing permission from the 2019 one. So that was granted, so that the lawful development certificate proves that development has begun and is therefore extant and can be carried out at any time, essentially. That's its purpose. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, it was just yesterday you mentioned that there was a row of trees that got to be taken out because of the condition, but you just said that Derbyshire Wildlife had said there was an important corridor, which I presume was the same row of trees. Am I wrong?
The specific comment was more about the hedgerows, and that the hedgerows are being retained. So the trees that are coming out are essentially going to be replaced with planting of a few larger trees, and then all the rest of the smaller trees on the site. So we have got updated Derbyshire Wildlife Trust comments, and they essentially still say that same point, but they're keen that where the existing access has gone in that made the scheme extant, that gets plugged up with a matching species hedgerow. So essentially it's plugged with a native species. Is that helpful? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Councillor Foster.
That's it. Thank you, Chair. When you originally explained about the plan, you said that the risk of flooding on the highway had been dealt with by means of a flood risk assessment plan. Can you tell me what they've done with that, please? Because I'm reading on 4.6 and 4.7, no response to date from Severn Trent and no response to date from NEDDC.
Yeah, just bear with me whilst I turn to the relevant bit in the report. So the report that they've done, it makes recommendations as what's required to happen on the site. So it's things along the line of finished floor levels should be at least 150 millimetres above surrounding ground levels. Site levels should allow for safe access and egress during surface water flooding. SUDS principles should be incorporated where feasible. For example, pervious surfaces. And best practice should be followed for gradients of proposed surfacing. The capacity of the system should include modelling for climate change, and this should encourage the flow of any surface water away from the buildings. And we've suggested a planning condition be used to secure those measures that are recommended in the flood risk assessment.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did read that in the report. I just wondered from a material, physical point of view, what they were actually doing to mitigate that on the main road. Because when you showed the plan earlier, it showed that most of the flooding was actually adjacent to the site, or potential risk of flooding. And I read about the litres per whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it's proposed to get rid of it. I just wondered what physically they were doing to
So
actually mitigate it.
The flood. So the flood risk plan that I did show earlier, that shows the flood risk, risk from surface water flooding. I'm just looking at it now, and it's just showing the site. It's likely to be run off from the road, so it runs the same length as the road, but it doesn't extend into the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, Chair, the conditions that are recommended by officers 12, 13 and 14 deal with all issues relating to surface and foul water, and particularly, as Stephen's just said, Chair, condition 12 requires the implementation of all the elements set out in the flood risk assessment to deal specifically with the issue of surface water runoff. So as officers, we're satisfied that with the imposition of those conditions, it will ensure that the surface water issues are adequately dealt with in terms of the development itself.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question to officers is about what policies are we supposed to follow? From what I understand, reading this, it's outside the settlement development limit, so it's in the countryside. It goes against SS1A, that it's not within a defined settlement. It goes against policy SS9, in that it doesn't fulfil anything in 1A to I. It goes against the Wessington Neighbourhood Plan, Part 2. and it goes against LC4, which is the appropriate mix of dwelling types for the area and sizes. So it goes against all our policies there in the local plan and NPPF, and it goes against everything I should be looking at when I'm making this decision, everything. And yet the officer's advice is that it's outweighed by the extant permission that's there, and we've had it explained about the lawful development certificate. That I understand, and I understand that you say it outweighs it, and that's what I gather, that's what we've got to judge here as a planning committee, whether we come to that same decision and believe that that extant permission outweighs. So I'll happily be corrected on that it outweighs all the policies. And if it does, where am I going as a planning member? Because it doesn't fulfil any of our policies, all those that are applicable. So it gives me nothing to actually make a decision on. I'm happy to look at this. I would have been happy to look at it favourably if I got policies or something to look at, but as it stands, it goes against everything. So I find it quite difficult to be following the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, may I just come back to Councillor Foster on that point? As Officers Chair, we agree entirely with what Councillor Foster said, and we've set that out in the report that in terms of the compatibility of the scheme with the development plan, it falls short in terms of that consideration against those policies, as Councillor Foster said. However, in this instance, as we've set out in the report, officers are placing significant weight on the so-called fallback position, which is set out in the discussion that Stephen and Councillor Liggett had in respect of the lawful development certificate. And so in accordance with paragraph 12 of the NPPF, officers have taken the view that that material consideration in this particular case indicates that the plan should not be followed. So we've followed the advice in the NPPF, Chair, in respect of this particular application in the particular circumstances of this case, and we've placed overriding weight on that fallback position. So we followed the argument that Councillor Foster set out, Chair, but we've taken the view that the extant permission is of such weight and can be continued to be constructed today, tomorrow, whenever, that this is a better scheme, and therefore that outweighs it being contrary to the development plan policies.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No more questions from officers? Right, that leads on to the final part of the process, our discussion about what we have heard, what we think and what we want to decide. Before going any further, I would like the clerk to remind us about motions.
Thank you, Chair. Please bear in mind, members, that a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment to a motion is moved and seconded, then the amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved which goes against the officer's recommendations, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reason for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations falls, or in other words it is not passed, that doesn't mean that the recommendations are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendations or a different course of action. This will need to be approved by the committee through another vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Alan. I would like to open the floor for debate. Councillor Cheetham.
No, it was
Councillor Hancock. Sorry, Councillor Hancock first.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit here, I agree with Councillor Foster, because it's like, why the hell have we even got a local plan if we're ignoring it, which we're throwing it out the window here. And the mitigation seems to be that we've got a development, and listening to the speakers, it's kind of like the argument is, well, we've come up with something that wasn't really very nice, so now we want to throw an improved version into the mix and get you to approve it. I think had they come back with another 8 property one, I would have been inclined to support it, but as it stands, I don't see that what we've got out in terms of the NPPF outweighs our policies. So it certainly wouldn't have my support in light of the fact that we're just looking hypocrites if we've approved this local plan and then we're not following it.
Councillor Cheetham.
Thank you, Chair. I take on board Councillor Foster and Councillor Hancock's remarks, but I just sort of take a view that we are where we are, and although it is subjective, I do think this one is a more attractive version of a planning application than the original that we've got permission for. So therefore, I'm minded to go along with the officer's recommendations. It is a finely balanced judgment that we have to make.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to, I've described the policies that I didn't feel that it fitted earlier, but going back to LC4 in particular, the mix of housing. Development proposals for new housing should seek to ensure an appropriate mix of dwelling types, tenures and sizes, taking into account existing imbalances in the housing stock. That's exactly what we should be looking at for any new development. It shouldn't be, for this area, it shouldn't be 4 beds going up. We should be looking at affordables for an area like this. We should be looking at 2 and 3 bed properties. That's exactly what Wessington needs. Now, I'm not from Wessington, but I know the area enough to know that that's what it needs. So, in particular, LC4 for me, it seems like it's a missed opportunity. That's exactly why we've got the local plan. And as people know, I was never a fan of the local plan. Like my colleague next to me, I never voted for it. I know that's politics, but at the same time, I've been willing to follow it more than anybody else and understand these policies and reason with each of you on this committee. So for me, the main thing is it doesn't follow LC4. So I'll let you vote it through, and I'll be voting against it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Liggett.
Yeah, I'm very policy SS1, sustainable development, especially C, access to jobs, services, facilities, accessible by foot, cycle or public transport. The school is full, there is no shop. So every time anybody wants to do anything, go and buy a pint of milk, they've got to drive to Alfreton or Matlock. That's the nearest they can, I just don't find Wessington sustainable for any more housing, quite honestly. And as far as the electricity concerned, the whole place just recently had to be run for quite a long time on huge generators about 6 times bigger than that television, huge things, because the power in the village just couldn't cope. So.
Thank you, Councillor Liggett. Anybody else want to?
Chair, if I could just come back on a couple of points, if I may.
Adrian. Yeah.
Officers, Chair, have not sought to duck the issue of conflict with the development plan. We've set that out clearly in the report and acknowledged that. However, the planning balance is one whereby, as I said previously, as officers we've placed significant weight on the fallback, a scheme that could continue to be built out tomorrow and with no redress to the local planning authority could stop that. And that's why, in this instance, because of the benefits that Stephen outlined earlier that we believe there are with the revised scheme, we believe that in this instance that outweighs that position set out in the development plan, in which the MPPF makes specific reference to, as I said earlier at paragraph 12. Just in terms of the mix, the approved scheme, as set out in the report, Chair, approved 4 4-bedroom dwellings and 4 3-bedroom dwellings, and this scheme proposes 4 3 to 3 4-bed dwellings and 5 4-bedroom dwellings. So the mix is, again, in officer opinion, very similar to that which has been previously approved. In terms of the sustainability, that again is an issue that we've weighed carefully, but again, in terms of the fallback position that there is, officers have placed significant weight on that, the fact that a scheme can be built out on the site, and therefore development has been undertaken, and I'm sure in the future will be completed. Just finally, Chair, on the issue of the utilities, I take the point that Councillor Liggett makes. However, those are matters that are for those utility bodies, and there's no evidence that I've heard or that has been put forward this afternoon which would suggest that the scheme couldn't be developed and be provided with utilities. And I would, whilst acknowledging Councillor Liggett's point, ask that if you don't have that evidence to put weight on that you be careful in how much weight you attach to that particular issue. I hope that's helpful, Chair, and if there are any further questions, I'm happy to try and help members.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, to pick up on what Adrian said, I think that the key concern that I've got here, every time we break from the local plan, we're setting a precedent, and it's going to get harder and harder to defend subsequent developments in the outside the settlement development limits because we're going to have this here. I know it's got extant planning permission and we can't do anything there in terms of that, but that was actually approved before the local plan was adopted. We've now got the local plan. I think to be truthful, I mean, when you read paragraph 12, it can be read how you want it to. It's one of these things that you can just make it fit how you want it to. Absolutely. So again, to me, I see no legitimate grounds for going against a policy that we now have adopted and that's in place.
Just very briefly, Chair, if I may come back, acknowledging again the point that Councillor Hancock's making, but each case, as we often discuss in planning committee, is judged in its own merits, and you bring to each case. Well, we should be making decisions on their own merits, and that's what officers have sought to do, Chair, in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that we go with officers' recommendations.
Second that, Chair.
Yeah. Is there any further questions before we move to motions? Councillor Foster.
Yeah, it's only a small point. In the report, what it should have mentioned is paragraph 12. We've just got a standard statement of this is in line with NPPF. That should have been made available. I can't see it in there. I'll stand corrected if it is in there, but paragraph 12 should have been mentioned in there for people to look at. I follow, I've got my own copy of the NPPF, and thank you for the copies you've given out this morning, but I am aware of that and did look at that, but for other members, you know, it's not mentioned in the actual report that I can see. But just for future, I like them all in there, all the policies we should be looking at. What I don't like happening at a planning committee is for planning officers to give other policies that we've not yet considered. But yeah, it's a proper get out of jail free card, that one. Thank you. I like that.
Councillor Gay.
Can I just confirm that if this is rejected, then the original plan would be able to be built, essentially?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Well, we have a motion on the floor, which is to accept officers' recommendations and approve this application.
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear, the motion was moved by Councillor Rouse and was seconded
Councillor Lacey.
by Councillor Lacey.
Right, we'll take that to the vote. Is everyone clear? Voted? Right. Thank you. That's been approved. Thank you very much. Right, we now move on to the second application, NED/23/00918/FL Sherland. I'm now going to ask the planning officer to tell us about any late comments and to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. I'll allow the officer to complete his presentation. Consequently, members, unless you have a point of order that you feel cannot wait, could you please reserve these or any questions about the process until the end? And I believe Alice Lockett is going to do this presentation. Over to you, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We had two late representations which are both in the late reps pack. One was from the neighbour about the tree, and one was from the tree officer just confirming that the condition of the tree is not suitable for be covered by a TPO. So this application is for a 2-storey detached dwelling and garage with creation of new access at land to the north of 14 Northfield and between 10 and 18 Birkenstyle Lane at Shirland. The application site is here outlined in orange. The site is located within the settlement development limits for Shirland. Here is a zoomed in version of the site plan. This is the site plan showing the neighbouring dwellings. Numbers 10 and 18 are to the west and east of the site, and 14 Northfield is to the south. The proposal is for a 3-bedroom, 2-storey dwelling. The dwelling has been designed so that it meets requirements of successful places. There would be no windows overlooking gardens or windows of neighbouring properties, other than those which would be obscurely glazed. The proposed dwelling and private amenity space would not be overlooked by neighbours. The following pictures are of a selection of those shown at yesterday's site visit. I've coloured the first floor windows proposed to be obscurely glazed in yellow. I think you can see that on there, just about, yeah. Ooh, sorry. This is a view of the site entrance from Birkenstyle Lane. The proposed front elevation is shown in the inset. The street scene is mixed at this point. The proposed dwelling would be set back from the road by approximately 19 metres. This is a view from the rear garden of 18 Birkenstyle Lane. The proposed dwelling will cross a 45-degree line drawn horizontally from number 18's kitchen window, but due to the distance and its height and roof shape, it will not cross a vertical line. All first floor windows on this elevation in the inset can be obscurely glazed by condition. This is the view of the site from the drive of 14 Northfield, the applicant's property. Obscure glazing of the first floor window on the proposed southern elevation inset can be secured by condition, so there'd be no overlooking. This is a view from within the site towards the rear of 10 Birkenstyle Lane. As you can see, there are no rear windows on the part of the roof adjacent to the site. Due to the design of the front elevation of the proposed dwelling, which is inset, there will be no windows which directly look towards this dwelling. That's because this garage is an off-shot coming forwards. This view is from further back in the site, looking north towards 10 Birkenstyle Lane and the access. The dwellings to the left of the photo are 8 and 6 Birkenstyle Lane. Number 6 has a side-facing window, although this is not visible in this photograph. The first floor windows of the west elevation, which is inset, are at a sufficient distance and angle from the side-facing windows of number 6, so as not to cause overlooking. The northernmost first floor window of the proposed dwelling closest to the garden of number 10 will be obscurely glazed. This is a view towards the western boundary of the site. This area will become garden of the proposed dwelling. The western elevation, shown in the inset, will look out over this area. There is sufficient distance to neighbouring windows for the garden to be considered private and sufficient distance between the western elevation and surrounding dwellings to ensure their privacy is not harmed. This photo is from the access looking to the west, and this one is looking to the east. Visibility displays are across adjoining properties, but the Highways Officer is content that given the speed and nature of the road, this would not pose a severe threat to highway safety. It is noted that shared visibility from accesses is a characteristic of Birkenstyle Lane. This tree is located in the garden of 10 Birkenstyle Lane. The owner has stated that the roots and branches encroach onto the application site. The council's tree officer has confirmed that the tree is in poor condition, possibly diseased, and it is not worthy of protection by TPO. As the tree does not warrant a TPO and is located outside the application site, the impact of development on the tree would therefore be a wholly private matter, and officers do not consider that it's an issue that impacts on the planning decision. The proposed dwelling has been designed such that it meets the minimum requirements of successful places, with regards to privacy and amenity of both existing and future occupants, and this weighs, on balance, in favour of the scheme. The design of the dwelling is unusual, but it is considered compatible with a mixed street scene due to it being set back from the road and the screening provided by adjoining units. The Highways Authority have confirmed the access is acceptable in these circumstances and is no different from other existing accesses on Birkenstyle Lane, and the proposal will not represent a severe impact on highway safety. As a consequence, officers are of the view that the scheme is acceptable and, when taken as a whole, meets the requirements of Policy SS7 of North East Derbyshire Local Plan, and are therefore recommending approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alice. Right, guys, we have two speakers on this application, the first of which is Councillor Rowe, the ward member. If you'd like to take your seat, Councillor Rowe. And you've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, can I make it clear, please, I'm not here to discuss the merits and access and egress and the traffic along Birkenstyle Lane. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to represent both as a district councillor and obviously as a chair of Shirland and Higham Parish Council as well. And collectively, we're asking permission that permission is not granted as a proposal falls well short of the requirements on the following points. Policy point SDC 12, the quality, design and placement, and I have the bullet points. Policy SS7, development is in unallocated land and it is in the local plan, it also sits in the neighbourhood plan. And points 855 through to point 860, there's several points in that section there. It doesn't contribute to successful development and it falls short on at least 4 of those points. In summary, the building is not in keeping with existing surroundings and dwarfs the properties around it. Therefore, we'd ask that this is not granted on this occasion. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for Councillor? Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Councillor. I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here.
Of course you are.
I'm going to anyway. Yeah. You mentioned a few policies, namely STC 12, which I've got in front of me, and SS7.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got them, but I'd be happy to hear which parts you think it's against yourself. Is that a fair question, Chair? I know you've told me off before for asking questions you thought were leading, but I'm asking about questions which have already been, about points that have already been put. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I did offer, Chair, to raise the point, so in Councillor Foster's defence. Yeah, SDC 12, certainly point A, does it respond positive to the local character and context? We don't think it does. Point C, does it create a good zone which is well related to its size and surrounding in terms of its layout, its form, height and massing scale and plot size and elevation treatment? We feel that the house is all house and no garden and it's above the roof line of the existing properties in the area, particularly number 10 in all fairness. Include boundary treatments and landscaping. Again, it's 80% house and 20% garden. There's no fine balance there. The garden is small in comparison to the size of the property. Point F, create well-connected places that are easy to move around, gives priority to pedestrian, cycle movements, etc. And wherever possible, facilitates access. It's enclosed, it doesn't go anywhere. There's no other access except through those 2 drive gates. It doesn't offer anything to the local community at all. Effectively, it's a hideaway house sat behind fencing. That's the ones I've got for SDC 12, Councillor Foster. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members have any more questions for Councillor Rowe? No? If you'd like to retake your seat.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Right, we've got one other speaker on this application, which I believe is Mr. Pilkington. Is that right? You've got 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, councillors. I'm reading this statement on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Hardacre, who live at number 10 Birkenstyle. Theirs is the house with the mansard roof that you saw on the photos. It's immediately adjacent to the site, and they've lived there for 18 years. The submitted tree report denotes the tree in their garden, but it's accompanied by a statement saying it won't be affected by the new dwelling. Well, clearly the photo that you saw, that's wrong. Half the canopy overhangs the development site. The proposed dwelling is going to be positioned very close to the tree, so it will have to be severely cut back to allow for the construction of the new dwelling, thereby risking its long-term health. To say the tree will not constrain any development, as is stated in the tree report, is incorrect. However, most importantly, the Highways Officer states that 43-metre visibility displays can be achieved in both directions. As you can see on the site plan drawing, it's on page 52 of the report, but we've also seen it on the graphics. The display to the west crosses the frontage of number 10. It's the orange broken line cutting right across the front of the property. Permission hasn't been given for that splay to cut across the front of number 10, so again the drawing is wrong. It's showing a splay which is unachievable and also unlawful. You aren't allowed to show visibility displays across third-party land without the permission of that landowner. For the record, achievable visibility to the west is likely to more like 17 metres. So on that basis alone, we feel the application should be refused. Finally, you'll note on page 47.3.4 that an outline application was refused for the same site in 2004. The reasons given were the position of the proposed dwelling having an adverse impact on adjacent properties and a lack of highway visibility. Neither of these grounds have been satisfactorily addressed. So to conclude, we feel inaccurate information has been provided regarding the tree. The design and position of the proposed dwelling is clearly at odds with the Council's own design guidance, and the statement that 43 metres visibility can be achieved is just so wrong as to be unbelievable. If 43 metres can be reduced to 17 metres and be acceptable, this will establish a dangerous precedent, which suggests the scheme doesn't address any of the grounds for the previous refusal, and would ask you to refuse this application also. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for the speaker on the points that has been raised? Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Mr. Pilkington.
Thank you.
My question is, you're representing the occupiers of number 10, yeah?
Yes, correct, Councillor.
We've heard from the previous speaker about roof lines to do with number 10, and I'm looking at our policies SDC 12, which we have to follow, high quality design and placemaking. For other members, it's on page 143 of the local plan. In particular, C and E. So C mentions roof lines, and also E mentions the amenity of existing occupiers and create a good quality of amenity for future occupants. So my question is about the people you represent at number 10. What's your consideration on the amenity of those occupiers there, and also any comments you've got on the roof lines? I should have addressed the last speaker on the roof lines, but anything you've got to say on that? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I purposely extracted that from my speech because Councillor Rowe was speaking about that, and I know you don't like us duplicating, and fair enough. One of the photos on the presentation from Alice showed the rear elevation of number 10, and it will affect the amenity. It's quite clear. It will affect the amenity both of number 10, who the the neighbours I'm representing, both their rear elevation habitable room windows and their rear garden. In terms of roof line, I honestly couldn't tell you whether it's higher or lower, proposed to be higher or lower than the surrounding properties. It is a big, massive building that's proposed, and it's very close to the boundaries. And in that respect, I would say the massing is likely to impact the amenities of the occupants at number 10, and if I may say so, numbers 18 on the opposite side and number 8 further down towards, and possibly even number 6. It's only not affecting the amenity at the people at number 14 who are the applicants.
Thank you. Right, that's it.
Thank you.
More questions, thank you. If you'd like to retake your seat. Right, colleagues, you will now have the opportunity to put questions to the officers about the application. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's for Adrian or Alice, really. I look at that building, and that, for me, looking at the rest of the street scene around it, is twice the size of anything else around it. How have we allowed that massing to happen on such a small site? Or is it possible? Because you've come up with grant. I mean, and we've heard about the ridge heights, and we've heard about, you know, the plot sizes against the massing of the property. Just wondered how you'd come up with grant for it.
So it's a balanced decision. In my view, I think I said in the report that the design is quite contrived, I agree, and it's been done like that to make sure that it meets the requirements of successful places. It doesn't impact 45-degree lines, it doesn't impact two 45-degree lines, it doesn't have overlooking of gardens because they've put bathrooms and other rooms that could have obscurely glazed windows in all the right places. But as a result, the design is odd, I would say. But weighing in its favour is it's in the settlement, it's a mixed street scene, and it doesn't. In my view, it does meet successful places. It has a sufficient size garden for the size of house, given the guidance that's in successful places. So, in the end, the balance was very fine, but I was of the view that it falls in its favour.
Councillor Liggett.
Just to ask what officers thought about what Mr Pilkington said about the entrance, the access onto Birkenstyle Lane.
So I discussed this a number of times with the highways officer, and he was of the view that it is acceptable that on Birkenstyle Lane visibility displays are across other people's land, so that number 10's visibility display would be across this plot land. So they're all using adjoining land to get the visibility display. Sorry, not explaining that very well. And I did question him a number of times about it, and he is of the view that it wouldn't have a severe impact on highway safety, which is what we have to look for now from the MPPF.
Right, I just find it strange that it was turned down before for exactly the same entrance. And that, I know what you're saying because I know Birkenstyle Lane very well. There's a difference. Most of the properties on Birkenstyle Lane are set back with hedges, etc. And like you say, you're looking, but that, number 10, literally blocks the view entirely. To pull out of there and look towards your left is very, very, very restricted. and it's very close to the corner at the turning onto Town End as well. It isn't a nice place to pull out of, because I have worked on a garden just a couple of doors down, and it took us an awful long time to pull out. So, and I think the position of that is even worse personally.
The difference between the 2006 application, is that the MPPF has changed, that we now have to have a severe impact. So that is the difference.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about 7.26, which is on page 63 of the report. And it's just further explanation and comments on the end of the paragraph. It says, as a consequence, it is considered that the building is of a bespoke design that cannot be described as achieving the high quality of design expected by successful places and policy SDC 12 of the local plan. So we've got there that it cannot be, so it does fail. So when we look at SDC 12, which is page 143 of the local plan, Ms. Lockett, which part are you thinking that it doesn't achieve there? So which part am I looking at? We've got the first paragraph, and then we've got A to M in SDC 12. And officers think that it doesn't achieve the high quality of design. Which part are we thinking it doesn't achieve? Which policy? Thank you, Chair.
I think parts of C and parts of A, but other parts of it. So the fact that it doesn't impact the amenity of neighbours weighs in its favour.
Just if I can add to that as well, Chair, the issue in terms of design is quite rightly the one that members will need to consider carefully this afternoon, and as Alice has gone into some detail this afternoon about, as we've set out in the report, we've sought forensically to dissect all the various elements and set it out in the report with drawings and photographs for members so they can understand the issues that we've got. And we acknowledge that, I'm not entirely sure which adjectives Alice has used this afternoon, but certainly we believe that the design is of a very bespoke nature that's been undertaken specifically to seek to achieve all those various elements set out in successful places, and we've balanced that with what we've set out in the report as a very mixed environment in which it would sit. To the rear you've got new dwellings with the high gable end facing the site. You've got a mansard roof property number 10, which has been referred to this afternoon, sitting to the front right on the road frontage with an archway forming a carport. Next door there's perhaps a more traditional mid-century dwelling. You've got terraced houses 2 doors down. There's one property of a terrace that sits above the others. So it's a very mixed scene, and we're setting this unit, which is of a bespoke or contrived design for this site, within that context. And that's the balance that we've sought as officers. We would ideally have liked a traditional dwelling with the normal windows and doors that we all drew when we were kids, that is nicely proportioned, but that's not what you're going to get in this site because of the specifics of the site. And that's what we mean about it not achieving the high quality that we would normally require, but it's set in a specific context, Chair, and that's what we've sought to balance in our recommendation to members. And as Alice has explained, we've tried to set that in the context of the site and provide the information that you will need to make that own judgment that you'll have to come to this afternoon. Does it achieve the requirements, as Councillor Foster and others have said, the requirements of policy SDC 12, SS 7, which seek that issue about high quality design. Perhaps we've done a bit too long, Chair, but I've tried to, hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, you didn't go on too long for me at all. No, absolutely fine, that, Adrian. Great recovery. But I've got to say, I do agree with the planning officer I felt, from what you've said, I completely agree with that. It does fail on A to C. For me, my own view, and I know this is kept for the debate part, the next part of the meeting, but it also fell on SDC-E as well, in that it doesn't protect the amenity. I can see that, and I can see from what's been said from the speakers. But yeah, I completely agree. It does. I agree with you. It does look like it fails on A to C. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No more contributors? Oh, Councillor Gay.
Can I come back to the highways issue? Would you describe this road as a sort of quiet residential road, or is it a bus route? You know, 'cause it is a bit worrying that it was turned down and now it's going through. I'm just trying to assess how serious that is.
It's not a quiet residential road. I wouldn't say it's like an estate road. It's a through route and a bus route, as you said. But there's quite a lot of parked cars, so, you know, the speeds are not great, I would say, from my experience of being down there. But yeah, it's this sort of change in emphasis onto the severe impact on highways that we have to take into account compared to the previous application, which is why I did question the highway officer quite a lot about it.
Thank you.
Just on that point, Chair, paragraph 7.33 of the officer report does go into that issue in some detail, sets out, again, Alice has said about the MPPF, which was first introduced in 2011, as members will be aware.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the next policy we should be looking at, which is SS7, in particular A. I can see from looking at the plans, and which is page 51 of the local plan for the members, I can see from looking at the plans and looking at the size of this, that for me, I already don't feel that this is appropriate in scale and design. Could I ask that officers sell this to me? That you think it is appropriate in scale compared to buildings that are nearby. So SS7A is appropriate in scale. Thank you, Chair.
As Adrian explained, the street scene at that point is very varied. There's houses on large plots and houses on small plots. There's terraced houses. There's a house with the mansard roof. So there's a big variety, and where there's a mixed street scene, it's harder to ask for a particular character because each individual house is different. Which one do you go for? So in this case, on balance, and particularly given that it's set back from the road, I was of the view that it does meet that part of the policy, part A of SS7.
Don't sound like that, Chair. That sort of answers the second part, which is design, and I get that there's mansard roofs and there's various different properties, different types of properties nearby. What I'm particularly thinking about is the scale. So it links in with SDC 12 with the massing. So is appropriate in scale. So we're looking at the size. So it's that comment I'm after really from officers. Thank you, Chair.
Well, as I hope I've explained in the report, the site has the layout of the site provides appropriate sized gardens. It provides appropriate amount of parking. It's got turning for cars. The house is, I don't believe, particularly tall in relation to the other housing around, especially the development to the south. And as such, I am of the view that the scale is in keeping with the surroundings because the surroundings are so mixed.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Chair. I think to kind of, I'm perhaps trying, I don't intend to be putting words in Councillor Foster's mouth, but I think he and I probably have a similar opinion, and I'm picking up on a word that Alice used earlier about meeting minimum standards, which it does feel very much like it's purely ticking boxes, because it is a large house on a very small site, and it is a varied street scene. I know that street scene well, and it's not that uncommon to where I live. It's a whole range of different houses, but it's almost like we're taking something completely new that is going to be out of place anywhere and just letting it happen. And it's trying to understand the rationale behind that, because it doesn't fit in with... yes, even a varied street scene has a context. You would expect it to kind of follow suit with something that's there. And we just seem to have something that's being dropped in there that wouldn't fit anywhere in a million years. So it's trying to understand the rationale behind that.
I think I've agreed that this design is not great, but I think it's outweighed by the other factors that are outlined in the report. The fact that it's in the settlement, and therefore there's some presumption in favour of sustainable development. It doesn't, in my view, impact the amenity of neighbours, and because it's set back and somewhat screened, the impact of its design is not going to be as great as... I mean, if it had been right on the road side, then that might have been different, but it is set back.
If we just add to that, Chair, we have sought to set that out and our conclusions in respect to that in the report, in terms of how, as Alice has said, the site of the dwelling is set back between and through the other housing. It does relate to the larger dwellings to the rear. So we've made our judgment on that balance of the issues, and members need to go through that same judgment this afternoon in coming to your own conclusions. Do you believe that it is designed in a manner that is compatible with its surroundings? Because every development has an impact. It's whether that impact is harmful. And our view, because of those site-specific circumstances, are that in this case, despite the unusual design, we don't believe that what is proposed would be harmful. Members will need to take your own view on that this afternoon, Chair. That's the nub of the issue.
Thank you, Councillor Liggett, and then Councillor Foster.
Thank you. That's how I was just going to say, actually, 8.2. Not only does it say minimum requirements of successful places, but it also says, due to it being set back and screening provided by the adjoining units. Well, I find that slightly horrifying, because the other words, the adjoining units are the ones that's got to look at it and screen it from the rest of the street. So I look at that in a completely different way, but just...
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to follow on from what Councillor Hancock's said, and hearing the what we've got to balance against this application's failings. So what it's got in its favour, it just seems a bit inappropriate for me that it's set back and that it's in the settlement limit. Well, so would so many other applications. You could put any other building of a better size, but any building at all there, it could still be set back and it would still be in the settlement limit because it's in the same place. So they don't feel like the other side of the planning argument when we're weighing up whether we should be giving permission on this. I know that's probably part of the debate later on, but it's relevant because it was mentioned here in this part of the meeting to Councillor Hancock's answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No more questions? Right, that leaves us on to the next part of the process, which is a discussion about what we have heard and what we think and what we want to decide. So we'll open the floor for debate. Councillor Cheetham.
Thank you, Chair. As other councillors have alluded to, I feel that this proposed development is out of proportion to the local street scene and contravention of policy SS7A and SDC 12C, and therefore I'll be voting against the officer's recommendation in this case.
Thank you. Anybody else want to contribute? Councillor Liggett.
I was just going to propose. I was just going to propose that we vote against officer's recommendation. on the grounds of it definitely not agreeing with SDC 12.
I'm not opening it up to
Aren't you?
motions
Fair
at the
enough.
minute. We're just still part of the debate. So, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I know we've heard of the intentions of two councillors there. I'd ask that if they are thinking about knocking this back, that we do discuss here which part of the local plan it does get refused on. I think that's very important. For me, and this is the part of it, I'm not proposing this, Chair. I'm thinking SDC 12, A on massing and scale, C, as we've heard from Alice, and E because of how it affects the amenity of the existing occupiers. So A, C and E I feel are very strong points. SS7 I'm thinking in particular A, that it's not appropriate in scale and design, and SS7D in that's I believe an overarching one if I remember right. Just one second. Accords with the policies of the plan. So SS7D. So those are the. That's part of my. Yeah, I've got A. Said A already. Yeah. A, which is not appropriate in scale and design, and D, which is accords with the policies of the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, to be truthful, I'm not going to say much different to what anybody else has said. I don't think the site itself is necessarily an inappropriate site for a house. I do think I've got concerns about the access to the property, but as Alice quite rightly says, guidance has changed, so we've got to work with what hand we're dealt with right now. But you look at the pictures, and I mean, without being rude to the person who designed it, it looks like a workhouse. It's quite oppressive, narrow windows. It's really not nice, and the people either side of that would have to live with that. So there is an impact on their amenity, even if it's not necessarily overlooking them. So I think, yeah, I couldn't support this as it stands. That doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't bring something different back and look at that in a context. But this is just so out of context with the setting. I don't see how we can support it. And echo what the points Mark's made. There's nothing more to add to that.
Thank you. Councillor. Sorry, Adrian. If you'd like to
Thank you,
respond.
Chair.
Thank you.
Just, I hear the views being expressed by members. Just in terms of the, if you were minded to refuse the application this afternoon, just in terms of the issue of amenity, I think as officers we accept that there would be some impact on the adjoining properties, Chair, but we've sought to set out in some detail why the standards set out in successful places would be met. Just would appreciate clarity on that particular point, Chair, if members are minded to refuse the application this afternoon, what issue of amenity impact that you have the concern about, Chair, so that if challenged we are able to defend that should any appeal be lodged. I'm just the concern I have, Chair, is because we as officers we believe it meets your standards set out in your guidance of successful places, and therefore in terms of amenity, yes, the neighbours will be able to see the site and will be impacted by it. Don't think we would seek to oppose that view, but it's just in terms of the issue of amenity, what exactly members are concerned about in terms of the amenity. I would welcome some clarity on, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Adrian. I'd like to contribute to this debate. I'm in two minds with this proposal, but I do think the officers have covered a lot in the report that have mitigated what our concerns are. And I do think, particularly with regard to the SDC 12, I think it is making an efficient use of that piece of land. And we've all, it's been expressed here that they do think it's a suitable, members think it is a suitable area for a dwelling. And I'm minded to be honest, to accept this proposal and go with officer recommendations, because I think they have, with what they've said within the report, mitigated many of the problems that we've got with this, and particularly, I mean, there's the condition of the glazing on the property, there's street scene, it is set back, and I think lots of those things mitigate what concerns we've got, and I would personally vote in favour for this proposal. But I'm going to open the floor to debate, to motions.
Yeah, are we still on the debate part? Yeah. Okay. So if we're debating what you've said, Chair, it's setback you've mentioned, suitable area for a dwelling, and efficient use of land. I completely agree with all of those. But so would, it's a bit like what the officers have said, within the settlement limit. We could tick all those boxes with another house, with a more suitable house of a suitable massing, a different roof line. It would still be set back. It'd still be a suitable area for a dwelling because it's in the same place, and it's still efficient use of the land. So for me, my concern is about this property. So I've got no argument to what you've said, because we are debating this, no argument about having a dwelling on this property. It's not about that, it's about this particular property. When it comes to amenity, I think other councillors might want to speak about amenity. For myself, when you look at the definition in the local plan, it's a positive element or elements that contribute to the overall character of an area. That's your definition. Officers put that in, and I'm saying it doesn't. So when you're wanting clarity on how it would fit SDC 12E, I would say a positive element or elements that contribute to the overall character of an area, in that it doesn't. Would that be okay for officers? Thank you, Chair.
That's helpful, Chair, because that takes it away from the issue about overlooking, for example. It's more a wider issue about, as Councillor Foster set out, the amenity, that impact on amenity, rather than a specific overlooking distance. That's helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Just for clarity, Adrian, with regard to the overlooking, I thought they've been quite well covered in the report. Can you, it was down to a minimum, the amount of overlooking that was
Yes, Councillor Foster, Chair, just set that out. In term, it's not an issue about distance between windows or looking from windows. It's not that personal amenity, if I can use that term. It's a wider, going back to the design of the scheme, which I think is it's the discussion. That's where the discussion's gone. That clarity is helpful, Chair. So it's not an issue about personal amenity, overlooking distances, privacy. It's a wider issue about visual amenity and amenity of an area. Yeah, it ties it back to the issue about design, which the committee are discussing, Chair. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Leggett.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's more the physical size of it rather than where the windows are looking, etc. I think it's just the scale and the massing of it more than anything else. Are we on to proposals?
If no one else has got to contribute to the debate. Oh, sorry. Councillor Peterson.
Yeah, I seem to be on a disagreement with everybody. I quite like the design. It's different. The rest of the street is different. There's no two houses up that street that appear to be the same. So what's wrong with something a little more innovative, if I can put it like that, that does occupy the space and it's trying to keep it clear of everybody else, and I don't see anything wrong with it. What's...
I know.
I don't see, looking at the pictures, I don't see anything wrong with this design. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett.
Sorry, Fran. I know it's difficult because I know the place.
All right.
It absolutely fills the plot. That's the trouble. I think that's what it is. It'll overshadow everything else.
But you won't see it.
Well, they will. All the people... the street scene won't, but the residents will.
I assume the rhetoric of this design is to get it as big as it possibly can for the area that it's fitting in. That's the only thing I can suggest, and I disagree with my colleague across there. I don't particularly like it, but I agree with other colleagues that it's the perfect place for an house, but probably not this house. I'm just guessing that it's the rhetoric is the size, and that's caused the design.
Right, I'll open the floor to motions. Councillor Liggett.
I'm going to propose that we go against officers' recommendations on SDC 12, A, C and E, and SS 7, A and D. Oh, yes, and D.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hancock. Right, we'll take that to
Sorry,
the
Chair,
vote.
can we just be clear
Yes.
on that then? So the motion is to go against officer recommendations on the grounds that that's not compliant with policies SDC 12, A, C and E, and policy SS 7, A and D. Is there anything which the planning manager wishes to say before we move, Chair?
Just the issues that we've noted down here, Chair, hopefully this reflects the views of members, is that in relation to, I've got 4 adjectives here, siting, scale, size and massing, which are seem to be the elements that have been mentioned or alluded to by members. So we would specifically relate back to those 4 assessments, Chair, and particularly not the issue about overlooking, etc.
Thank you for clearing that up, Adrian. Right, so as explained, we will go through the facility on the microphones. Can we start the voting process, please? Thank you, members. The motion has been moved.
That's the application review.
Yeah, so the application. Right, now move on to item 7. I now call on the planning officers to explain our next report. Item 7 is appeals lodged and determined.
Thank you, Chair. It's an agenda item that members are familiar with in terms of the appeals that have been lodged and determined since the last meeting in February. You'll see that 2 appeals have been lodged in that period, Chair. There are a number of appeals that we are currently in the process of dealing with. It's quite a hectic time for appeals at the moment, Chair, but you will see 5 have been determined over the past period. And I always say this to members, think appeals are always worth 5 minutes of anyone's time, just in terms of how they reflect the decisions that we've taken, but also in terms of how they argue the various points that we often discuss and debate here at Planning Committee. And just taking each in turn, Chair, the appeal that was allowed in respect of a stable block in the Greenbelt, an interesting appeal, Chair, and not one that we feel has followed the general tone of Greenbelt appeals, but members will perhaps be interested in that. We have got other similar appeals coming down the track, so we'll be interested in how they are determined. The appeal by Mr. Rowland, bearing in mind the discussion that we've had earlier on this afternoon about certificates of lawfulness, Chair, is a very interesting decision that was taken by an inspector in respect of a building that was, in the view of the appellant, one that could be erected without further recourse to the local planning authority, and the inspector took the view that the information submitted did not show that the building was to be or could be used for agriculture on that holding, and therefore the appeal was dismissed. So very useful in terms of our decision making going forward, and particularly how we judge agricultural buildings being submitted for approval to the council. Mr. Hewitt was a very interesting Greenbelt decision, which took a different line to that set out in Mrs. Barton's appeal. And in terms of inappropriate development and very special circumstances, it was a very interesting case, Chair. And again, I'd recommend members take a few minutes to read that. Mr. Kairi, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, Chair, was a site in Dronfield that a number of members will be aware. It's, and I apologise, I don't know the name of the pub on the corner. Three Tons, Mason's Arms. That the inspector supported the council's view in respect, particularly of neighbourhood plan policy regarding a non-designated heritage asset, which officers added to in terms of the appeal decision. The appeal was seeking the demolition of that building and the erection of 2 detached dwellings. So we've just had a debate about design this afternoon, Chair, and the inspector goes into some detail in that about the design of the new buildings and the scheme and how they would or wouldn't fit into the character of the area. So that's helpful in terms of that debate, and the inspector sided with the council, didn't feel that the loss of the building was offset by the new houses that were proposed. And finally, Mr. Philbin's appeal in respect of some would say a very minor matter at Fulgate Mill, the reinstatement of a window, and the inspector in that instance took the view that the works that was proposed would adversely impact the character of that listed building, and it wasn't offset by other matters. So again, a very, very interesting decision. I can reiterate, Chair, and commend to members all the appeal decisions that you get through, and having a look through them, because they do reflect then on the decisions that we take as a council.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that, and can I just say well done on that performance. Absolutely excellent. That you know, it shows that 4 have been dismissed. It shows the excellent work being done by planning officers. So very, very supportive of that. Thank you for that, Adrian. What I'd like to speak about is Mr. Kair's application. Something which I'm very supportive of, having some replacement building on that site. And I know officers work very well when it comes with developers, when sites come up and you work in conjunction to eventually present those cases here. Could I implore that officers worked with Mr. Kair when it came to any future applications, rather than they're coming and getting knocked by? Can we have that to and fro in with planning officers and the developer? Could I encourage that? Thank you, Chair.
That would certainly be our normal practice, Chair. And in this instance, we did seek to have that dialogue during the application process, but we couldn't reach an agreement. So it's come to this point. But I take the point that the Councillor Foster makes, Chair.
Thank you, members. Do we? Has anybody got any more questions first on that report? No. Do we agree to note that report? All in favour? Yeah. Thank you for that, Adrian. Right then, colleagues, I have no urgent business. I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much for all your attendance.